Are the streamers ready then? Okay. All right. Good afternoon. Back to the marriage molecule. Welcome, everyone. We're going to finish last week's lesson with the what was talking about budgeting, with the information on insurance, and then we're going to start this week's lesson on investing. So let me just say, this is a prelude. We're not going to get through investing because there's a whole lot of material. So we're probably going to have to add on a week, or just go as far as we can get, if you don't want to add on a week or whatever. But there's a whole lot of PowerPoints, some handouts and things to help enhance the knowledge and keep it. But we really have a lot to go through, so we'll get as far as we can, and then, finish it up next week.
Okay, well, this one, this one is on the life insurance, and we put it in budgeting because life insurance is part of the budgeting problem, and it's important. And remember also that this is for teaching of our kids and anybody who is interested in budgeting, no matter who they are or how old they are. So many are well on their way to financial independence, but when they're called home and God decides their time is up, their time is up. And sometimes that can be a very devastating effect on their life and their family. That's why life insurance was created, and that's important when it comes to budgeting. But the idea of life insurance is generally a good thing, but many don't understand it enough to make wise decisions on what life insurance really is. So our purpose here is, why do we need it, and what do we need to know? And one of the things is, we never really consider life insurance as an investment in and of itself. The purpose of life insurance is for our family in case of our death, before we ever reach critical mass. Now, hopefully we remember what critical mass is. That's when we decide that we're going to retire, and we have decided that we are going to live on our income. We never have to work again. Our income is going to be earned from our interest of that pot of sum that we have created. So the insurance should be that big lump sum that comes from our insurance company if we die, and then that big lump sum becomes that critical mass. So life insurance money should not ever be spent by our survivors. That's one of the rules of life insurance. Nor should it be considered an investment on our behalf to provide funds for those people that survive us. It's designed to be put away for those people as an investment, so that they themselves can live on the interest that it produces. In other words, it becomes that critical mass for others, for that family, not to be spent, but to become critical mass for the next generations. So that it's a pot of money that guarantees our critical mass. So if our critical mass, when we were alive, was $2 million, then our life insurance policy then becomes $2 million. Now, as we occur during our life, and we realize, well, we're halfway there, we already have $1 million, we don't need $2 million anymore for life insurance. So we can cut that back and save money on that, or vice versa. And we'll get into that a little bit in the future. But in essence, when we're buying life insurance, there's two basic policies that we can buy in life insurance. And the two basic policies are term or life, whole life. So there's either term or whole life. And those are the two basic policies. Now, whole life is a life insurance contract which provides coverage of the policyholder, which lasts his or her entire life. So it never expires. As long as you pay the premium, it's going to last your whole life. So there's no specific age limit. It's a traditional whole life policy. It never runs out. And upon the inevitable death, because it's going to last your whole life, that policy will pay out to the beneficiaries that you list. And this policy also includes, in most cases, an investment component when you buy the whole life policy, which is called, in our terms, a cash value of the policy. In other words, as you get older, it accumulates a cash value, which you should never turn it in, but some people decide to turn it in because of that cash value. That's why some people call it an investment, people that sell the policies, but you should never look at it that way, because the people who you're paying all this money to are putting it in interest. They're getting a bunch of your interest, they're giving you a tiny piece of it, and then that's why it has a cash value, because they're insuring your life, but they're also giving you some interest, and so it has a cash value. But that cash value is pennies on the dollar. So what they'll do is they'll say, well, we'll trade it in for you and give you an annuity. And an annuity product is sold by these financial institutions, and an annuity is designed to grow funds for you as an individual and then pay you out over a period of time at some later point in time. And annuities look like a good deal, but they're not. They are those people trying to sell you a steady cash flow as an individual during your senior years, but it's, again, them using their interest at a very low rate, money that you could have invested for yourself, and only giving you a tiny piece of the pie that you would have gotten if you did it yourself, or a small piece of pie that you would get in a much larger sum if you just died and let the policy pay out for itself. So whole life and annuities work because the insurance companies are investing your money for you, paying you some of the money that you earn during those investments. And agents are making most of the commissions by selling you these products. And you really have to say no when it's your money that's being invested, and you're paying for the premiums, you're paying for the insurance, you're paying for all that extra benefit, and you wind up paying for that tiny little amount that they're offering you when it comes time to settle for these tiny little things that you should be getting, if and when you die, larger amounts of whatever the face value of the policy is. Will they provide you for income in your later years? They could, a tiny amount, but they're not for what they were designed to be. They were designed to be that big pot of money that your survivor would be able to use as their critical mass. If it's not that big, they're useless. You just spent a lot of money for nothing, and you're going to get nothing from it. Life insurance is a good product, but not for an investment. So if you're looking for that, you're wasting your money. Now, term insurance, that allows the purchaser to pay for only the cost of the insurance for the term that it's allowed. So term insurance has a specific time period. Those time periods are usually 5 years, 10 years. You can get them up to 20 years. You can get them up to 30 years, 40 years. So you pay for that functional amount of insurance. So the premiums are much smaller. There's 5 things to remember when you're purchasing insurance, whether it's term or life. Now, our suggestions on these 5 things are: 1, making sure it's term. Always buy term, not whole life, and not annuities. Number 2, when you're buying the term, make sure the policy is renewable and convertible. It must be renewable and convertible. Renewable simply means that when the term's up, you can renew it for another term. So if you haven't reached critical mass, or your critical mass is you've already got some and you don't need as much insurance, you can cut it back, you can renew it, but not for as much if you don't need as much. If you still need the same amount, then you can renew it for the same amount. So the amount doesn't disappear. It doesn't need reinsurance, re-doctors. It doesn't need reviewed. It doesn't need anything that if you put a renewable rider on it, then it becomes renewable. You don't have to go through all the brouhahas to get it started again. You don't have to start from scratch. You can extend a policy for another term. The new term is usually be maybe sometimes a little higher cost, but it's still not going to be as much as starting from scratch. And the convertible part is if, and we'll get to this case in another time, if and when you need to convert it to a life insurance, to a whole life, which is extremely rare, but I'll point out to you when you should do that, then it is renewable and convertible. But those are the other insurances. So 3, renewability. Did I mention 3? Oh, yeah, 3 is that sometimes it'll be at higher cost, that you have to realize that when you do renew, it might be a higher cost. 4 is renewability also serves you in another important function, that it ensures that no matter what your health care is, it's always renewable and convertible. And that can be built into the policy, regardless of health. And then number 5 is never go without it. You still need insurance, just like in your auto insurance or your home insurance, you still need life insurance, because you never know when the angel of death is going to be there for God. So some people say, well, I'm very healthy, I don't see any need, my spouse doesn't see any need, she's healthy, you know, we're going to live a long time. Never fall into that trap. There's always going to be illnesses. Attacks and illnesses, just like health insurance, you need life insurance. So if a renewable term is in place, premiums will not go up during the term, but sometimes when the term's over, there will be an increase in price. But convertibility and all those other things will be a factor. Another function of life insurance is to perform as it arises late in life. So this is what I was talking about, where you can, if needed, buy whole life. And I'll explain. Suppose you live to be 80, 90, or 100 years old, right? And now suppose you really have become a millionaire, or you really want to leave, let's say $1 million, or you have 2 kids, $2 million, or you have 4 kids, you want to leave $1 million each. And suppose you want to leave $1 million to each of your 4 kids, so you have $4 million you want to leave them. Now, in certain states, if you leave $1 million to a kid, they're going to pay close to 60% taxes out of that $1 million. They're going to pay property tax if you leave it in property or in a house. They're going to pay the property tax. You could give them it as income or cash, then they're going to pay income tax. If you pay $1 million, though, in life insurance, $1 million in life insurance, they pay 0. They get the whole $1 million, right? So now, let's say you wanted to give each $1 million in life insurance because you're now 100, right? So or 80 or 90, and you realize the doctor just said you may die in any day or whatever, but now you want to buy life insurance for these kids at $1 million. So you go in, and the life insurance company says, well, yeah, we'll sell that to you, but it's $20,000 a month. Who cares, right? You pay that premium, and you die next month. You spend $20,000, but your kid gets $1 million, right? Tax-free. Otherwise, he would have spent close to $600,000 to get his million. You see what I'm saying? So you would take that to the people, the actual people who can figure out these funds, and ask them what is cheaper to pay the insurance premium, depending upon how long, of course, you live, or to go through all these things to leave a house and to leave a car or to leave this or to leave that, and they have to pay the taxes. And you have enough money because you got the $4 million, right? And you pay enough money to hire somebody to do this, and 9 times out of 10, they'll say, buy the insurance company and leave the insurance policy for them, and they'll make out better, right? Instead of you just thinking, oh, I'll leave my house, I'll leave my car, I'll leave cash, I'll leave all these things for them, and they're going to be stuck up in court for eons trying to get that cash, rather than a whole life insurance policy that they get it right away with no hassle, and they get the whole darn thing. So that's when you can actually use a whole life insurance policy. So a $2 million insurance policy may cost you a little bit of money, but it is a way to get them their critical mass right off the bat. So do not think of insurance in terms of dying. Consider it now in terms of critical mass and using that pot of not spending that insurance, but using that as your critical mass of investing. However, we can never know how long we have left or how insurable we will be. So, you know, a diagnosis, an accident, family history may rob us of the ability to become insured. So what we want to do is we do not want to solely rely on insurance through employment or insurance on delaying when we start. It's important to understand our budgeting, understand our critical mass, and then buy the insurance of term as recent as we can. And then we can adjust that depending upon the limits, but we know that's in place with our budget, so in case one of us or either one of us pass away, the other one now invests that, and they are at critical mass right then and there. The things to watch out for is agents. When you go to buy these things, agents who sell these insurances work in one of two ways. They work on a fee basis or they work on a commission basis. A commission agent will usually attempt to sell the products which generate the most commission for them. So they're going to sell whole life, they're going to sell annuities, they're going to sell everything under the sun that works best for them and generates them income every month for the rest of their lives, which means they're going to use every unscrupulous product in the book that's not in your best interest as a purchaser. So, you know, they're going to have a fee for service, they're going to have a fee which generates income for charging fees, for everything vested in their products. And they work for them and they work for the company. They will not work for you. So do not resist or resent paying a couple $100 for those people who work for fee. You do not want somebody who works for commission. And if somebody works for both, if they say, I work for commission or a fee, choose the fee. Because they work for the client. And they will do their best because they only get jobs who the clients recommend. They work on word of mouth. So they don't work for a company, and they will only sell products that the client uses. And when the client recommends them and say, yeah, go to Joe because he really worked us out and did a great deal, and I'm happy with Joe, That's where they get their basic money. So never use a salesman of any kind that works on commission, but especially in insurance. Trust me, my dad was an insurance man.
Okay, I got to see where we are here. Whoops. Okay, so now we're changing from budgeting to investing. So if you, this is the new lesson start. That the insurance was just
Budgeting.
finishing up the budgeting part. So at this point in time, when we're thinking about investing, you've gone through your budget, you've paid off all the debt, and now you got some extra cash, and you want to start investing it with the idea, as my husband was saying, about building up the critical mass. So you change your lifestyle. You realize you should really be living on only 80% of your net income and becoming more financially disciplined in the things that you purchase or in the goals that you make for your financial future. And now we want to learn how to make money work for us. Instead of us trying to work to get money, we want our money to work for us. Now, this is a little complex, but it doesn't mean that it can't be learned. Just like every other employment, job, area, it has its own lingo. So if you go into engineering, engineers have their own lingo, right? If you go into law, law has its own lingo. Medical, every profession has its own lingo. Well, investments do too. And it's a matter of learning some new terminology and getting used to it, familiar with it. And also, you want to learn and understand sort of what we call the rules of the game. But nothing is rocket science, okay? This is all easily learned skills if we put the time and effort into it to learn. Remember that we have the ability to master money, otherwise Ad and I would not have told us to do it. So, okay, he has equipped us to do that which he's asked us to do. So, the first obstacle we usually have to get over is a fear. And that is fear of, what if I lose all my money, right? That always seems to be behind, particularly first-time investors. You know, they're just very cautious. And I'm not saying you don't be cautious, don't misunderstand me, but we seem to feel like if we can see the dollar bill in our bank account or in our pockets, then it's there, you know, when we need it. Investing it, you know, out there in the, you know, ether world is like, I don't see it, so where is it? But a dollar that you invest is out of sight. You're other than your statements you get telling you know, how much your investment portfolio is worth today or this month versus last month, that kind of thing. Obviously, you can monitor it. But let's face it, the stock market has had some pretty big crashes over the years, right? There's always been depressions. Those things are part of the investment world, all part of the investment cycle. You want, as I said, to be cautious. So if your fear is preventing you from jumping both feet in some high-risk speculative investment, then good, it should, all right? You don't want to do that. Because the riskier the investment, usually the bigger the payoff, but usually the higher the risk of losing the money, right? But we don't want our fear of what we don't know or what we think we don't understand to prevent us from investing, okay? We want to take that plunge. Some people are just a little bit maybe lazy. They use excuses. Well, I don't understand it. I never will. I don't have anybody explain it to me. But they can spend hours on the internet learning how to download music files or upload pictures or Facebooking or whatever. But when it comes to spending those hours on learning about investments, they tend not to, because that is outside the comfort zone. So we are pushing everybody right now outside the comfort zone. We want you to learn so that you can improve your financial situation and that we can live in the way that Scripture teaches us to live. Many financial situations that people find themselves in are not necessarily because the people are incapable of handling their money successfully, but they're just not motivated to invest in themselves and gain control. Some have what we like to call a poverty mindset. My parents were poor, my grandparents were poor, I'm going to be poor too. Or just the mindset of, well, we get by. It's good to just, we get by, and that's okay. Living paycheck to paycheck. God forbid something happened that all of a sudden now that's no longer possible. Paycheck, whether it's a loss of job or it's an injury that you can't go back, whatever it is, it's very, very common. So living paycheck to paycheck is a very dangerous way to live. Struggling with money, or having money struggles, I guess is a better way to say it, has almost become normal, expected behavior. It really is. What do people talk about around the water cooler or at a gathering or whatever? It's, this whole idea of having these money problems. And are these days that we're in now, it is. Let's face it. The economic system is difficult right now for everybody, for families. It is. It's hard. Things are very, very expensive. So prices have gone up, but paychecks necessarily have not gone up, right? Especially in the same rate that commodities have gone up. But if you think you've got to live in poverty because your ancestors did, you're mistaken, because poverty is not hereditary. It's not hereditary. Those generational curses can be broken the same way any other generational curse can be broken. Remember, Adonai wants us to be debt-free. He doesn't want us to be borrowers. But we do have an enemy too, don't we? And he'd love to see us enslaved by money problems, by barely getting by, but that's a lie. Being financially independent is realistically attainable. So let's first start with, and I don't think this started yet with, okay, we're going to get there. All right. Starting with stocks and bonds. Now, I know this is when people's eyes glaze over, like, oh, okay, stocks and bonds, oh, yuck, that's about the most boring thing. Well, get over yourselves, because we've got to talk about it in order for you to learn how to invest in them. Stock is ownership in a particular entity, corporation, which allows the stockholder or stockholders to share in its profits. They invest, the company invests their money, and they pay back dividends to their stockholders. A bond is a loan given over time at a fixed interest rate. Securities are comprised of stocks, which is the ownership, or bonds. So a security can either be a stock or bond. Instruments are tradable assets, like a house or a car. The stocks and bonds are intangible assets. And again, it's not like you can see that dollar bill in your pocket or your purse or your wallet. They're intangible. They represent an amount of ownership, depending on how much you invested in that particular entity. The goal of buying and selling these assets is to make a profit, right? That's why we're doing it. So, want to buy low and sell high. We want our income to be greater than our expenses. The difference between stocks and bonds, again, bonds are loans. So you're not buying anything. When you buy a bond, you're not buying anything. You're lending money to whoever issued the bond, which is usually the United States government, right? You're lending them money. So you're actually becoming like a bank, where you're now collecting the interest on the money, the bond that you purchased from the entity, the government. And these investments do comply with Scripture, because it says, again, we want to be the lenders and not the borrowers. But that's all you receive. Interest on that loan is all you receive, all right? So whatever interest rate it is at the time, bond interest is usually pretty low, that's all you're going to receive. So it's not, certainly isn't the only mechanism you want to use to invest. For example, if you buy a bond for $1, but it's at a 10% interest rate, when that bond's paid off, all you get is $1.10. So they're not considered great investment instruments to use. But there are some advantages. They are relatively safe. You know up front, because you know how much you bought, you know what the interest rate is, so you know up front what you're going to receive and when it will be paid, depending on the term of the bond. So if you have already a large nest egg, maybe that's one thing you want to start investing in is some bonds. Some disadvantages of the bonds, again, is the limited income production. You're limited to the amount of interest. And long-term bonds can tie up access to money, because you don't have access with it until the term has expired. So that's bonds. Stocks, on the other hand, are ownership. You're actually buying ownership in, let's say, a company. So, for example, you invest in Pepsi-Cola. Depending on how many shares, how much shares of stock you purchase will determine what percent of the company you own and how much you're going to get back in dividends. Now, they also have advantages. Again, bonds only earn interest, only earn money from the interest. Interest is what we charge people to use our money, right? And Scripture calls absorbent interest usury. But you're tempted to charge a lot of interest because you want a pretty big return. So there's that temptation there, if you are going to be a lender, to charge a gross amount of interest so you can get a lot of money, and Scripture is definitely against that. Now, stocks can earn money in 3 different ways. Some stocks pay interest that's similar to a bond. They pay people who own them, like I said, part of the profits that that particular company made. So if Pepsi-Cola sold a whole lot of Pepsi, your interest rate, your dividend, is going to reflect that. So that profit that you get from your investment in the stock in the company is called a dividend. Now, the other thing, stocks can split. So a stock split occurs when you own one share worth $1, but then the company you've invested in, let's say Pepsi-Cola, decides to split. So now you have 2 shares worth 50 cents each. What you own hasn't changed, but now you're going to receive dividends on 2 shares instead of just 1, albeit at a lower amount. And companies do this to keep the cost of shares low so they can get more people to invest. That's the reasoning behind that. Yeah. Right. But, right, it's at 50 cents now instead of $1. Yeah. So, this is like, I'll give you a little summary here of the 3 ways stocks can make money. Interest, dividends, and splits. Okay, we talked about each one of those. Growth investing, finding stocks with good growth potential. And that's a matter of just sitting down, learning what companies are considered to be the best. And we're going to start getting into some of that in a little more detail as we go through this. So the idea is you want to accumulate as much wealth as you can in a short amount of time as possible. That term, the risk, is the chance you take for investing your money. Okay, that's the chance. There's always a risk, always a risk. It might be a very small risk, depending on the stability of the company, but it could also be a huge risk if it's a brand new company. Good investing sets reasonable expectations on both the risk and the reward. So you want to have a balance there. As rate of growth increases, the risk involved goes up as well, we just talked about. But as growth decreases, the risk decreases as well. $1 that's put into a safe, you have a safe in your home, has a low risk of being lost. But it also has a 0 growth rate. It's not going to do anything, right? It's going to sit there. A get-rich scheme to double or triple our money may have a high growth potential, but it also has a high risk of failure. So a $2 lottery ticket, it is possible it can yield millions, right? But it still is a poor investment. Anything that's going to get rich quick. Everybody wants to go and gamble the money and thinking that they're going to hit it big, right? There's always that draw. Now, have there been get-rich schemes that have paid off? Yeah, they have. Most of the time, those are the ones where people are not disciplined enough to handle the money they get, and so they end up losing it anyway. As the possibility of growth goes up, again, the risk goes up. So there's a direct relationship between that. The chance, as the possibility of growth goes up, the chance of success goes down, and that's an indirect relationship. So there's other ways you can invest money other than stocks and bonds, but we're going to focus solely on stocks and bonds. So I am going to change the slide now because my husband's going to start talking about this. So I'll just put it up there. You have a little bit more time, and you'll get to it.
Okay, before we go on to this, I just want to make sure there's no questions on what Pat has covered, because that's about as complex as it gets.
See?
I'm positive. All there is stocks and bonds. You're either you're loaning or you're buying stocks and bonds, which is called the market. That's investing. You only have other choices, savings accounts, and we'll go into that, money market accounts. That's it. I mean, that's where you can put your money, under the mattress, bank accounts, but that's the only choice you have. There's a new one out now, it's called high yield savings, but you have to go online for them because the banks that have physical buildings are too expensive. So the banks that are online, they're the only ones that can afford to give you a high yield account. Return. If they don't have a physical building, they save a gazillion dollars. So they can give you a 5% interest on your checking account. So you can go online and get one of them. You can still write checks and all that kind of stuff, but they don't have a physical building. And so you can get 5% on your cash instead of 0.5% because they don't have a physical building. But there's things like that. But other than that, there's the market. And when you're selling the market, all they offer is stocks and bonds. So I just want to make sure that foundation is reached before we get into the gazillion types of stocks and bonds. So as long as you understand what we're dealing with, you can understand all the rest, because they're all in those categories. So if you have any questions about, and I forgot the page number of those 4 categories, which I did not write the slide on because I'm so used to them, I didn't think in terms of a slide. But stocks, bonds, securities, and instruments. Those are the 4 words you're going to need to know. So stocks and bonds are the 2, but securities are what they call stocks and bonds. That's just a fancy word for securities. That's what you'll be investing in. That's the stock market. It's where they sell stocks and bonds, okay? And then instruments are anything that's tradable. Anything you can sell or buy is called a security, stock and a bond. So those are just terms, like the lingo of what they use or what they call these things. But in essence, you're dealing with stocks and bonds. Okay, and what was the 5th term? I forget what the 5th term was. Oh, intangible assets. It's because you can't see somebody up there in their bank have the actual physical stocks and the actual physical bonds. Now, you can buy a bond that you can see. You can buy a type E bond, or you can see an actual bond. You can buy one and put it in your own safety deposit box. But when it's intangible, that means you're buying it over the Ethernet and you can't actually see it. So they call it intangible asset because you can't see it. But those are the 5 terms you need to understand. But in essence, all we're dealing with is stocks and bonds. That's what we're investing in. It's either a stock or a bond. Now, there are other things you can invest in, like gold, and we'll get into those categories. And she mentioned there's other investments, but we'll get into them later. But right now, all we're talking about in the scary stock market are stocks and bonds. So as long as you understand that one is you're buying in a company, and the other is you're giving a loan, that's all you need really to know to understand the rest. So just, as long as you have no questions there. And it's that teachable to other people. Okay? So let us go now into learning where the stocks and the bonds are sold. Okay? There's a couple places where they are sold, purchased. So the one we're going to cover first is the stock market. Okay? That's also called the equity market because of those definitions. Okay? The equity is called a stock and a bond. They're called equities. And one of the most vital areas in our entire economy, not the world, but the United States, not the world, because Japan has one and other places have their own, Germany, right? But for the United States, is where the excess of these are sold is the stock market. It's where we will invest our 10% of the money that we pay ourselves. It's called the stock market. Now, if you want to see where that 10% comes from, you have to go back to your class on understanding budgeting. Okay, so hopefully you understand where this 10% that we pay ourselves is coming from. And that's where our budget is to live on the 80% of net spendable income. And we have to invest that 10% regularly, no matter what the stock market is doing, and we'll get into that too. This has to be gradually, continually investment of that 10%, and that will automatically, for anybody, lead to success. This has to be our serious investment of money. This is intended investment for wisely investing without any kind of huge risk. And we can invest this over any extra money that we want to gamble with or use or play with that we call here and throughout this test, it'll be known as fun money. Fun money is not your 10%. Fun money is any money that you wish to, like, buy a lottery ticket, or you wish to do something else with, or invest in.
Which we don't recommend.
I'm sorry?
Which we don't recommend.
Oh, well, we do in some cases in this thing, and we'll recommend fun money, but you'll see that.
No, the lottery ticket.
Oh, the lottery ticket we do not, yep. But some things we do here. Fund money is like in an IPO. An IPO is a brand new corporation that might be very much on our side as believers and really wants to change what the world is doing, and we really like what they invest in and what they do in, like Truth Social. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Okay, well, you can now invest in that and everything they believe in. So you might want to put $10 in it because it might be a gazillion-dollar company like Apple, right? Or a Newsmax, which is another channel that's trying to fight all the other channels. You can now invest in that. So we might put some fun money into it, thinking that if it becomes a $1 trillion company like Apple or Google, it would be fun to watch them succeed, and also, you know, might show a little profit. But we don't want to invest in it because they're brand new and they could also fail. You know, but
You don't
a lot
want
of
to
them
invest a
are
lot into it. This is just money that
Right.
you could
Having fun with.
be okay if you lost it.
Right, if you have extra, you know, just to have fun with. So those are some examples of fun investments. Okay, but we're way too far ahead for that. Okay. Fun money is money we don't care if we lose. So we spend fun money on very high risk adventures that we like because they're on our side. So the very first thing we're going to teach is Principle 6.
This is added on from the budgeting. It may be number one for investment, but
Yeah. So this is a financial, oh yeah, right. So the other 5 was in budgeting. This is financial principle 6 for investing. Never invest in a single stock or a single bond. Now, you know the difference between the two, unless it's with fund money. Okay, and we'll get into why, but never in a single one. Okay, never put your eggs in the same basket. If I invested 100% of my money into Pepsi, because I love Pepsi, my entire investment would be in one company. So I should have another slide here. So if I listed my whole portfolio, the concept of having different companies, my investment wouldn't be in one company. Because if Pepsi would go bankrupt for whatever reason, didn't even have to be their fault. Somebody put poison in the water line just for Pepsi because they hated Pepsi. Or Pepsi, the president had an accident and he killed somebody, or they go bankrupt or whatever, I lose all my money, right? However, if I put half of my money in Pepsi and half of my money in Coke, I only lose 50% of my money, right?
that's Coca-Cola, not cocaine.
All right. However, if a terrorist did hit the water company, I'd still lose half my money. Oh, I mean all my money, because the water is being used by both companies. So even at 50-50, if I chose the drink industry, I'm still in trouble, right? So the whole idea is to diversify. Never put all your eggs in one basket, in one company, or even in one type of company, because you want to diverse it. So now we have a scenario that if I invested 20% in 5 different companies, Pepsi, Coke, I don't know what the other 5 companies were, I could only lose then maybe 20% of my stuff, unless they were all water-oriented. I still would lose it all, okay? So the idea is now if I invested 5 different companies of different industries, okay? So if I invested in 5 beverage companies, 5 computer companies, 5 healthcare companies, 5 clothing companies, and 5 housing companies, right? And I got 20% in each. Now, what's your chances of all of them failing? Exactly, right? So that's where a true investor can soften all the industries to where they're pretty sure none of those companies, or even if one of them fails, I still only lose 20% of my investment. So the more companies you diverse in, the less chance of any part of your money really going into trouble. And the more you invest in different companies, the more sure you are that failure is going to call along the line, like a domino effect, right? Doesn't that make sense? Okay. So now you should have next slide. That's called diversification.
I don't know. It's not working right at the moment.
It's not working?
Well, there you go.
Okay. So now that leads us to principle 7.
I guess. I didn't make them, so.
What's wrong with it?
He wanted to know if this was number 2 under investment. I said, yeah, but it's number 7 in the whole financial.
To me, yeah, I didn't split these into, it's all financial, because there'll be a 3rd lesson, so it's all financial. So it has to be taught all that way. You can't teach them separately. There's no reason to budget if you're not going to invest, right? If there's no reason, because why budget if you're not budgeting to do any reason with the money? Like, why budget? You know, you're not living on a budget now, so the only reason to budget is so that you can get out of debt and start investing. Otherwise, why do it? You know, it's ridiculous. So anyway, this is number 7 or 2, or however you want to look at it. But it's principle for finances. Never invest all your money in a single venture. Spreading money over many investments increases the chance of return while decreases the risk of loss. So now my money is spread over, in our example, 25 companies. Now, we don't have to have names. We just know they're different companies, and that suffices. And we will invest the 10% that we pay ourselves and budget to live on the 80%, still tithing to God and still investing 10% consistently to ourselves. Gradually, consistently investing that. This will, oh, I'm on the wrong page. Okay. I get nervous when I'm in front of a... So if one company collapses, in this case scenario, I only lose 4% of my money. If one industry, the whole industry collapses, I only lose 20% of my money. Expanding this further, I can actually invest in 50 industries Or I can choose 500 companies. Eventually, I can get to a point within the market where the entire U.S. economy would have to collapse. Now, that would leave Japan, because I can invest 5% in foreign as well. But the entire U.S. economy would have to collapse before I lost my money, all of it. Actually, 95%, because I can still do 5 in foreign nations in the stock market. Expanding further, I can do that 5% in foreign markets, in the stock market, which means the entire U.S. economy would have to collapse, and I would still retain 5% of my money. Diversification protects us from disaster. So how many baskets are there out there for us to choose to invest in? How do we find every company in every industry to make our list of investments? And the individual investments are called portfolios. So how many companies do you think there are in the United States of America on the stock exchange? Well, hundreds of thousands. But relax, because that work is already done for us. It's already done. It's already out there. And these are the lists of the various stocks and bonds, because they're already put together in what is known in the stock market as mutual funds. So I need the next, oh, you already got it? Oh, you can see the pictures.
That's why I'm standing here, so I can see you.
Oh, okay. So this next one is called mutual funds. Well, what are mutual funds? Mutual funds are portfolios, but they're portfolios not of individual stocks. They're portfolios of vehicles comprised and controlled by individual fund managers. So there are people out there who specialize in this and do this for you. And mutual funds are great ways to invest in the stock market with diversity already built into it. And this is where we would put our 10%. Buying mutual funds versus buying individual stocks or bonds in one company or one industry, or, and again, we can do with fund money, like I like Pepsi, so I might buy Pepsi or Ravens. You can actually invest in Ravens or Steelers, you know, with fund money, thinking they might hit the Super Bowl, you know, and you get a return. But they're all available. But mutual funds buys ownership. But in this case, you do not own in any of the companies individually, but you do own part of the mutual fund. You actually become an owner or a piece of owner in that mutual fund. Now, depending upon how big that mutual fund is, you may only own 0.0001% of that fund, but you're an owner. And because you're an owner, you get those 3 parts of the prize. You get the interest, you get the division, and you get the splits. The dividend, and you get the splits. You get all that. But it's still wise for us to diversify in the diversification. So we are allowed to invest in many multiple funds. So introduction into the place where the stock, oh, why do I keep going back here? Oh, no, that's right. So now let us look at multiple places where these bonds are sold. And I need the next slide. No, yeah, this one. So where can we go to buy and sell these things? The one that we were looking at that was called the stock market This is perhaps the most famous of America, and it's called the New York Stock Exchange. Now, what makes this one more different than all of the others that are available is this one is a physical building. This one's on Wall Street. It is in New York. And all it is a bunch of people that sit together and they do sell these shares. They ring a bell in the morning and they hit a dong, I think, in the evening when it closes. And in between, everything that we want to buy, and you will see this, I think you had mentioned that you see this on the daily news. You'll see this go up and down daily on the news. You'll see it go up and down. This was in the time when everybody got out of the market. It was like at 8,000 when there was a depression. If you would have stayed in the market now, it's up to 43,000 now. That was back in 12 years ago. But people got out, and we'll get into that too, why they got out. But, and we'll get into why it's so famous now, okay? We'll get into that. Now, the next slide is another place where you can just buy and sell them. This is called the NASDAQ. Well, that's a bad slide. Okay, this is called the NASDAQ. This is just another place where you can buy and sell these things. This was created in 1971, and this is a system of computers. This has no physical building. This is just a bunch of computer hacks that got together and said, well, we're going to buy and sell these shares, but they're spread all over the country. But it's similar to like our internet. It allows people who are not in New York to buy and sell these shares. They're just not located in New York City. They do not have a physical building. They're just a bunch of people that why are my slides coming out left? I must have did something. I must have did something wrong, never mind, because they look great on my screen. Okay, so anyway, this one here, you can't really see it, but those two where they buy and sell them, those are called market indicators. In other words, that's where they buy and sell them. But the market indicators, the NASDAQ and the stock market, they predict where our economy is going. So they will go up and down based upon what the economy is heading. So if they're going up or they're going down, people will predict in general if they think the economy is doing good or if the economy is doing bad. You see a drop in those two, people will say, oh, the economy is crashing, because of an election, because of a war, because of a supposed attack, who knows what. The media will start telling you, there's an inflation, there's this, there's that, but they use them as an indicator of the inflation rate, the unemployment rate, the gross national product rate. Those are all market indicators that the economy is going up and down. Now, the next major place of buying is this one called the DJIA, the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Now, this one is the third of the most common indicators, like the stock market and the NASDAQ. Now, this one only measures 30 of the most significant stocks in America, 30 of the biggest companies. It was created in 1890 by Charles Dow. And his idea was to look at the 30 most important American companies. And if we looked at 30 of the biggest American companies in the world, if they were growing, the outlook of America looked great. If they were not growing, the outlook of America would not look great. Now, the next one is the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is another common market indicator. Now this one, because of the word 500, this one measures 500 of the largest companies in America. And this is the fund that most often when we look at mutual funds, this is the most common mutual fund that is tried to duplicate. So whatever the S&P 500 is doing, that's what most of the mutual funds try to mimic, because this one's become the most popular for success purposes. The second to the market, the actual stock market. The stock market is the prime thing that all mutual funds try to mimic. So if you look at the stock market, the Dow, and the S&P 500, all three of those are usually listed every day in the news, so that you can always check to see where your mutual funds that you're investing your 10% in and how they're doing compared to these three that are always in the news, because that's what you always should be looking forward to seeing what your fund is doing compared to those funds. And those three are always on the news 24/7, so you can check at any time to see how you're doing. And then there's the next slide, which is the NASDAQ composite, which is all the NASDAQ individual computers that get together, and every day they mark what 3,000 of these equities are doing on the NASDAQ, on the S&P 500, and on 3,000 of the NASDAQ computers. And they're not on the news because they're becoming pretty much more for high-tech people. But they're measuring 3,000 of the biggest high-tech companies in America. So let's just stop here for a second, just to absorb all this information. Now, the idea of all this is just so that you can get a general feel of what the market and the stock market actually is. It's not rocket science. All of these is just talking about stocks and bonds and how popular they are in people who are investing, trying to make a profit. Now, we're going to get into some dollar amounts pretty soon, but this is just the world of finance, right? Other than go to the bank, put your money in, and try to live on what's left. This is trying to accumulate critical mass, right? So it's only what to do with your 10%, which are things we were never taught in school, but the whole world is trying to figure out. But we, as believers, have been neglected, shall we say. It's like we put our talent and hide it in the dirt. And God says, well, wait a minute, you didn't even get interest. And so all of the scriptural principles we've been ignoring and following the world with the borrowing and the debt and not following his principles. This is the world's way, but it's not the scriptural way. So we haven't been trying to use the scriptural way to live in the world. So we haven't learned how to be in the world but not of the world yet. But with this course and this knowledge, we can change that. We can understand this in a way that they can't. And that makes all the difference. Because when you boil it down to it, it's what do we do with those talents? Whether it's 1 or 5 or 10. And we have that parable for a reason. We know what God meant. And those who have more, even more, is required. So now just a little side note is how big are these companies that we're investing in? So, oh no, that's not the one. You want to go back to small cap.
There isn't.
There isn't small cap? Maybe I put it out of order.
Tell me, go ahead. Well, you're talking about small cap and mid cap here.
Oh,
This
okay, okay. Then that's what I want.
one. Okay.
I couldn't even see it. Okay. So how big are these companies that we're going to be invested in? Again, it's a sign of how much we can lose. So these companies in America, they're labeled small cap, mid cap, and a small cap company, when we're doing in these funds, a small cap company is a company that's worth $250,000 to $2 billion. That's a small cap company in America. You can't even get on the stock market if you're worth less than $250,000. And under $2 billion. That's a small cap. That's just to get as one company into a mutual fund. And you have to have a good growth potential. And you could not have failed in your, I think it's a 10 or a 15-year lifespan. Now, a mid-cap company is worth $2 billion to $10 billion in order to get into these funds. Now, the small cap companies have a lot of growth potential. The mid cap companies don't have as much growth potential. Once you're at $10 billion growth, they figure you can't grow much anymore because you're kind of big. So they're less risky because they don't feel you can grow much, because growth is what it's all about. So if you think by going into a $10 billion company, you're going to grow more, that's not necessarily true because they've already grown. But now you have a large cap company. A large cap company is when you're worth over $10 billion. And a $10 billion company, actually, it goes to $1 trillion. You know, now we have 4 $1 trillion companies. It's the first time in America we ever had $1 trillion companies. There's only 3 of them, I think, in America today. It's Amazon, Apple, and that new company I can't say the name of because it's some funny name, but they make the battery, not nuclear, it's for the cars.
She said lithium.
Lithium, yeah, the lithium battery company. But it has a funny name. I don't know what that is. But it's the third company ever to reach $1 trillion. Well, I don't think they make the batteries, but they make the lithium or whatever, but they're tied to that lithium. So anyway, we only have 3 of them. But their growth potential is small because it's hard to grow when you're at $1 trillion. You can't even measure the 1.1 trillion. You know, it's like 1.001%. Okay, so now we want to get into just some, and you don't have to memorize all these, but just some of the type of funds. All right, so that one fund you're probably familiar with, they're called spiders. This is a Standard Poor's Depository Receipts. This is a fund that runs on the same proportion as the S&P 500. A lot of these funds are what we call Me Too funds. Every bank in America probably has a fund of their own kind, and they try to put together all these different companies, and then they try to make the proportions so they equal one of the indexes so that they say, here's a product that will do exactly what X, Y, or Z does, and so buy me because we're just as good. And we'll get into how to watch out for those kind of things. And why is, because it's, okay. So a spider is a fund that will sell when you get really into high instruments, but you want to do it worldwide. This fund will do it very easily worldwide. The next one is Vipers. That's the Vanguard Index Participation Equity Receipt. That's a class of the 5 biggest Vanguard mutual funds that they have, that they made over the course of the years. They dumped it into one fund and called it Viper. They're probably one of the fastest growing funds. First of all, because of the name Vanguard. They've been very famous, and they've been performing pretty well over time. The next one is Ginnie Mae. Probably all heard of the Ginnie Mae. That's the Government National Mortgage Association. That's a government agency that deals exclusively with mortgages. A lot of people are stuck with the Ginnie Mae's because the government sticks their nose into everything, and then they have their funds, but they always lose money. Then the next one you're probably familiar with too. That's the, oh wait, you have the Sallie Mae. Was that on the other?
Ginnie Mae, Fannie Mae.
No Sallie Mae?
No.
Okay, well there's a Sallie Mae, I must have skipped that. That's the Student Loan Marketing Fund, Marketing Association. That's a publicly owned organization that split the deal with the United States government. That's the one that's dealing with student loans. That's the one that Biden wanted to say everybody that has a student loan is going to be forgiven. And then he ran into the Supreme Court that said he didn't have the power to do that. So all the loans were put into hold because they couldn't decide, because everybody stopped paying their student loans. And then the last one is Fannie Mae. That's the Federal National Mortgage Association. That's a GI agency which created a brand new mortgage market because this one is specifically for low-income Americans.
Does anybody need a break? It's 5 to 4. Are you okay if we continue? Okay. What number? What page?
14.
Okay.
Oh, you got the good part. I got the boring part.
I know. I'm the one that did the divisions. I'm not stupid. Okay. I gave him the hard ones. I got the easy ones. All right. So what about the track record of the stock market? We don't want to get we don't want everybody to get confused over some financial terms. The stock market, or the market, is really a simple concept, but it gets complex because it offers such a huge variety of products. So you want to think of maybe the financial market, the stock market, as a super mega store, right? Super mega. Historically, it yields about 10.64% an average on the stocks over the last 100 years. So has there been times when it's yielded more? Absolutely. Have there been times when it's been a lot less? Absolutely. But it's the one fund where we can trust our money, probably the most over the other ones. The stock market. So the stock market had actually earned 10.73% over the last 30 years. So it was 10.64 over the last 100 years, but it's 10.73% on an average over the last 30 years. Do you have a question?
Not a question, just a clarification. When we say stock market, We're talking about the New York Stock
Stock
Exchange,
Exchange.
that part of the market. Out of all those ones, we're talking about the thing you see every day when it says the New York Stock Exchange, that stock market.
So during those 30 years with inflation, our money grew 7.98%, and stocks were up 80% of the time. In 30 years, the market went down into double digits 4 times, okay? It's not always up. When it's an up, you know there's going to be a down at some point in time. In that same period, it was up double digits 19 times. And many of us have been investing, or we think we've been investing, in a house for 30 years. But we don't expect it to grow 10.73%, do we? Or we shouldn't if we're smart. Or even 7.98% after we take off all the expenses and taxes and that of upkeep. The point, we need to know that if we don't touch our money, we invest in the stock market, we don't touch it, it earns approximately 10% yearly. But, like the rest of the world, a lot of us are just impatient and undisciplined. So as soon as we see a little drop, you know, maybe that fear sets in or whatever, and we want to take our money out. Instead of riding out the lows, we want to automatically, we start to want to withdraw, and we shouldn't. We need to keep it in there. Fear, poor advice, or even greed are all reasons people spend, or don't invest. In reality, it's pretty difficult to lose all your money in the market, especially these days, since the 20s, since these days. To do so, you would have to buy high and sell low. So, this says 9. I don't know what happened to 8. Oh, here we go. Financial principle 8. Since the 1940s, the stock market has never lost money for anyone except those that took it out at the wrong time, okay? People lose money by taking their money out of the market at the wrong times. Number 9, investing takes time. We have to be patient and allow our money to work for us. We also have to be willing not to panic the minute it starts to drop. And sometimes that drop can be over a period of years before it starts to come back up again. That's the nature of it. There are no sure get-rich schemes. A real loss is when we sell our shares for less than what we paid for them. So if we bought apples or anything for $1 and we sold them for 50 cents, we understand we're going to lose money. Well, that same mathematical principle applies to stocks. It's an actual loss that could have been avoided if we had sold the apples for at least the amount we paid for them. We wouldn't at least suffered a loss. We wouldn't have gained anything, but we wouldn't have suffered a loss. So when people pull out of the market too soon, they're selling their shares of stock or their apples for less than what they had paid to begin with. Another scenario, which we can call a loss, sometimes when you get the financial statement as we talked about, it shows a negative for that particular quarter. In other words, it went down that particular quarter. That's not really a loss, okay? If a person invests $1 and earns 75 cents in 6 months, they now have $1.75, right? But if the next statement shows his investment dropped to $1.50, was it really a loss? No. Still made 50 cents. Okay, taxes. Some people say, well, gee, I don't want to make a whole lot of money because now I'm going to have to pay a whole lot more taxes. Well, the stock market is one of the best ways to make money, as we talked about, and money is income, and we get to pay taxes on all our income. So we do have to keep track of what we make, fill out the reports, the forms, and everything goes with it. And so some people are turned off by all that, and they don't want to have to they get into that because it's perceived as a hassle. So the IRS, in its wisdom, realized that this could be a problem, and they set in place some mechanisms to address this particular problem. No. Believe it or not, the government wants us to be wealthy also. Scripture tells us we're to be a lender, not a borrower. The U.S. government really, the more wealthy citizens it has, right, the better it is too, as long as it manages the money that, anyway, we won't go down that road. Wealthy citizens don't necessarily need Social Security, right? They've got their own nest egg. They've saved. So if we have a lot of wealthy citizens that don't have to collect Social Security or aren't collecting Social Security, that's going to save our federal government some money. Now, what they do with that savings, who knows? But anyway, and the federal government set up an IRA, an individual retirement account, that allows individual taxpayers to contribute 100% of compensation up to a specific dollar amount, forget the dollar amount right at the moment, into a tax-sheltered account. So you're contributing into this IRA up to a certain amount that the government has set in place that isn't immediately exposed to the income tax. But the tax man comes eventually. Yeah. Yes.
When you have money in the stock market, you don't really recognize gains until you sell.
Correct.
So if your account shows that you've made money, you don't claim that as income if it's still in that account. It's only when you sell that you can claim it, I guess, as a gain or loss, depending on what it did or what it was when you sold.
Correct. In this tax season, that's what Kamala wanted to put in. She wanted to put in a tax that would have counted that as earned income, even though we didn't see it or withdraw it. And I think that's one of the reasons why she didn't get elected. But they're still talking about making that a taxable event, that just because you made it, but you didn't withdraw it, for the next 4 years, we won't see that as a tax. But depends on who we elect for the next party. We may see that. That's what they were shooting for all along. They want that to be, if you've earned it, just because you didn't take it out, that's on you. You should still pay the taxes for it, just because you earned it.
But then did they have the reverse, that if you lost money,
They pay you.
No. No, yeah, right, because you would not know how to claim that loss, because you didn't get to claim it as a victory, so you can't claim it as a loss. It would have just, no, you wouldn't claim that, right? Yeah, they would say, too bad.
right?
Yeah. But she tried to get that through.
Aren't there some states that you, like, they don't charge tax off of your IRAs and stuff like that? Like, you can move to certain states and they don't do that?
Yeah, federal law and state laws differ, and in the ones that do allow it, you wind up paying twice. Yeah, when you take it out. I don't know of any state law that will charge you when you don't take it out. And I don't know of any federal law. As far as I know, both of them will, the states that do charge you with the federal law, it's both when you withdraw, not when you earn it. That was a law that they proposed but never went through. But if the state charges, it would be only upon withdrawal for those states that do charge. Yeah. But some will turn around and then charge you for just living in that state, regardless of what you made. So they'll up that, like from 1% to 1.5% or 2%, or California is like 4%, and Alaska is 0%. In fact, Alaska pays you to live here. Yeah. So every state's a little different. Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully that helps. But states and feds are different. Oh. So what we're going to look at now, though, is what these are all federal now, entities of plans that cover us. We call them umbrellas. They're umbrellas that protect the tax that you pay on whatever you earn in these investments. And our government is trying actually to help us reach this critical mass, because if we reach critical mass, it saves them a bunch of money. So these are actually not investment vehicles in and of themselves. What they are actually laws passed by the federal government to encourage investments. To encourage investments. They are created by filling out a form, because they're laws, and all laws have forms. They are considered as umbrellas covering money in a real investment vehicle. They determine how taxes are paid and how contributions are made into investments. So umbrella one is called the IRA. The IRA is, in essence, pay me now or pay me later. Anyone can invest directly, like we were talking about, into the market, the stock market. And as an individual, this is just general investing, just general, as one obtains income, he or she would invest directly. They would be earning income, and he or she must pay taxes on that income. They would be buying directly into the New York Stock Exchange. The advantages of this investing is they would have thousands of products that they could choose from. The disadvantage is they would have to create the portfolio themselves. They have to do this all themselves, which means they would have to diversify. They would have to report everything they did. They would have to pay the taxes and the income. They would have to do that all by themselves, individually. Or they would have to pay somebody like an accountant or some kind of investor advisor to do it for them. Or they could use QuickBooks, or they could use some kind of software to help them through that, or TurboTax or whatever. But they would have to do it all by themselves with whatever knowledge they had, or go out and learn it, or take a course, or become a CPA, or whatever. But they can do that. Yes?
This is under an IRA?
No, this is just directly by themselves. No umbrella. No umbrella. This is just, they can do this. And when you see people who spend all day long on the computer and they're checking this and they're checking that, and sometimes they win and sometimes they don't. That's what people are doing. They're doing all this investment. They got 7 screens, and that's what they're doing. They're doing it all by themselves. Okay, all righty. Okay, so now 2 is the next screen is the IRA. Why is my screen so bad? Okay, so now we're looking at umbrella 1, which is the government trying to help these people who are doing it themselves. So the IRA is a place where now buying and selling direct into the market is okay. They can do that. But now the individual signs this paper and they get this umbrella which covers everything that they made. So the taxes now gets covered under this umbrella. It's an individual retirement account. Now you have to go through a bank. You have to have somebody that knows what they're doing to sign this paper and do this law. And this is a deferment of taxes. So it looks at all the investments that you made, the dividends, the capital gains, the interest, all of the things that, the things you put in, the things you withdraw, every transaction. But the advantage here is that the taxes are deferred. So you don't have to worry about the taxes at all until you withdraw. This is what you were talking about. Then when you withdraw, whenever that is, when that withdrawal is made, then you owe Uncle Sam whatever it is on the amount you withdraw. So you could be making hundreds of thousands of dollars, it doesn't matter. But if you draw $20, you're going to pay taxes on $20. If you withdraw $20,000, you're going to pay taxes on $20,000, whenever that is, okay? So the disadvantage is you have to create that portfolio. You still, with your 10%, you still have to go, once you've signed the form, you still have to choose what mutual funds, what funds you're going to invest in. You still have to choose that, okay? You still need to decide whom you're going to invest in, okay?
But Mike, a lot of times the employer offers these and they have them already
Not in
set.
an IRA, that's an individual retirement fund.
Right. An individual retirement fund.
So they're mainly for people that have their own business or people who just want to cover their taxes so they don't have to pay quarterly. It's an IRA umbrella to handle the, to cover the deferment. So it was a good plan. I mean, the IRA, I mean, the federal government was trying to help the individual guy who's on the computer to defer his taxes. The fly in the ointment was that the taxes needed to be paid, just not now, just later on. So if we made like $1,000 for 30 years, no taxes. But 30 years later, we're paying taxes on $30,000 plus interest, which is a hefty sum to be paying once we withdrew it all. So people were trying not to withdraw it and trying to find a way to hide the withdrawals. So it did not result in a vast majority of people investing. Yes?
Also, if you were to pay the taxes right away, if you could, at that point, the taxes this much, in 30 years, those taxes are going to be higher, so you're going to put more on the money than if you just paid it all along.
Right, but if you paid it all along, there was no need for the IRA. That was the whole purpose of it. And their thinking was, if you're in the tax bracket now, your tax bracket is probably higher, but 30 years later, when you're retired, your tax bracket would be much lower. But they didn't think that all along that time, the IRS or the government was going to raise the brackets all the time. So that didn't work out, because when you got older, the tax brackets were higher instead of lower. So their thinking was skewed, that better word, was skewed. So they miscalculated how the tax brackets were going to increase over a 30-year period. So it didn't work out. So it didn't lead to anybody really using that. But that's a good idea. But if they did that, they would have been better off just individually investing and not even needing the IRA. So people wound up, like you said, just going back to normal and then paying them quarterly. Okay, so now the next slide is umbrella 2. Now this is the 401k. Now this is the one where anybody could, it's a 401k, and then they had the 401b, which was for government employees, and then the TSP, which for federal employees, military people and anybody's.
You have 404K.
403B.
You have 404K and 403B.
404, maybe I mistyped that. I can't even see my notes here. I'm getting so tired. Oh, that's because I'm not on the right page here. $401k. What do I have up there?
404K.
No, it's a 401k. So that's a misprint up here. It's a 401k. It's a 403b, which is for government, and it's a TSP, okay, which was for military personnel, or what they call pseudo-military, which is when the military people hire civilian people to do military work. I don't know how that works, but it's civilians doing military stuff. So anyway, it's a 401k. Now the 401k was established for employers, okay? This was for employers which became eligible to open up for employees who were able to make salary deferred reductions in their paycheck to add to their investment, all right? Now, this was a great way for them to put in their 10% if they were able to budget and live on the 80%. Hint, hint, wink, wink, okay? Especially if there were two people both employed. Now, this was with pre-tax dollars. In other words, they still had to pay their taxes, but at least they didn't see this 10% money in their paycheck. So it went right into their contributions to themselves. Now, this had several benefits. The first feature was they were able to buy into the market through their employer, which meant they didn't have to see that money at all. And if they calculated 10% of their net, it was done. It was automatic deduction. They didn't see it, they didn't spend it. And it was tax deferred because it had the umbrella, right? Now, tax deferred still meant you would have to pay taxes upon withdrawal. So that was one of the disadvantages. But another disadvantage was that we didn't have the unlimited choices of all of the stock market. Well, why is that? Well, that is because the employer got to pick the funds. And the employer decided, I'm going to pick the funds that helped me, not the funds that's going to help the employee. And the 401k solved two of the problems. People would not spend that money elsewhere if they never received it, and the tax deduction would be deferred. They could fill out this form, they can go home, they could forget about it. Now, the employer was able to, because of all the paperwork, because of all the extra work on the employer, they were allowed to put some of the money from these funds into their pocketbook. So because of that, they were able to choose the funds that benefited them, that gave them a kickback, so to speak. So because of that, they were allowed to add funds to the employees' funds. It's called a match. All right. Well, that went off really big for the employee. So for every dollar, this is hypothetical, for every dollar the employee put in, the employer was able to match, say, 25 cents, right? Which means above and beyond the 10% that the market was giving these people, the employee was giving them 25%, right off the top. So it's a home run for the employee. All I had to do was sign up, and they're already making 25% of their target of 10% before their money even began to earn interest and dividends and stock splits, before they even invested, toward critical mass. It was a home run. And so the company said, well, we're going to pick these stocks that help us in the long run too. So there was a lot of games that were going on. But the advantages was automatic deductions, matching funds, and a lot of Americans took advantage of this 401k. Let me keep going back to the same page. And many were amassing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, the 401k was not a panacea that the government had hoped it would be. There were still drawbacks into this investment guide. What were the disadvantages of the 401k? The biggest disadvantage was it was still tax deferment, and people that were making all this money were realizing in 30 years, 40 years, they were going to have a massive amount of debt to the government. And they still would have to pay taxes on a large sum of money later in life. And the employee lost the ability to select their investments. And they were realizing they could have made a lot more money in the stock market than what these employers were choosing. So even with the 25%, they were losing what they felt could have been a lot more money than what they were actually earning, even with the 25%.
I got a question.
Yes.
If you have a 401k for an employer, the employer is contributing a certain percentage if they are. You're getting the benefit of that certain percentage that they're contributing to. Would you be better off than going in a Roth IRA where you're paying the taxes now? So the money that's being contributed, you won't have to pay that tax later.
The answer is yes. We will get to that, but in general, yes. If you pay it now, you will save all of the tax that it will accrue from now until retirement age.
But that's all of the money that you contribute, not the money that's made.
Both.
Correct, just what you contribute.
Both, everything.
Both.
Both. It's the money that it will earn now and the money it will earn in the future and everything. If you turn it to a Roth, all money that is not earned now and earned in the future days is tax-free if converted now. You pay that amount now, but then everything in the future is tax-free.
How are you paying the taxes on the money that you make?
By converting it to a Roth. You pay that now, but then every penny that it earns from now until whenever is all tax-free.
Oh, is it really?
Yes. The minute you convert, yeah, you pay the hit now, and then the rest of your life, everything's tax-free. You don't owe Uncle Sam nothing ever again, ever.
So why don't you do a Roth IRA?
Who the hell knows? We haven't gotten there yet, but that's the last umbrella. That was their last attempt. And people still aren't doing it. You just stilled our thunder.
Okay, it's almost 4:30. We are a little over halfway, but, I mean, like I said, we're not going to finish anyway. So do you want to stop here? Go on a little bit longer? I mean, again, we're not, unless you want to stay till about, I don't know, 6 o'clock, we're not going to get through it all anyway. So is this a good time to? Well, yeah, we're probably a little over halfway. Okay, well, that's what I just wanted to check. So we'll stop here at an umbrella.
How about Monday night?
On umbrella 2. Now, were there any of these handouts you wanted to give them tonight, or are they going to be?
No, they won't make any sense, no.
Okay, so they're for next class then?
Yep.
Okay, all right. All right, thanks.